Let's try this again. I'm Marky Billson, host of Tri-City Sports Now, heard weekdays on 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. This visor really doesn't work, does it? Here, let's try this instead. And I've got some thoughts on the Tennessee situation, the Tennessee Volunteers football situation, athletic department situation. If you heard Friday's show, you heard me have on John Brice, who is now reporting that Phil Fulmer did not sabotage John Curry to get the Tennessee athletic director position, despite the fact that several reporters from national sources had said that he had. And to be brutally honest with you, there are many questions dating back 25 years about Phil Fulmer and how he got the Tennessee head coaching job in the first place after John Majors. No sense in rehashing that. It's all, record and such. Majors told me personally that he really does believe that he was sabotaged in that situation one way or the other. But that's 25 years ago. I wanted to point out this, though, with Brice, and it's something disturbing to me about the media that covers the Tennessee Volunteers. On my show, Brice repeatedly referred to Fulmer as the Hall of Fame coach Phil Fulmer, or the Hall of Famer Phil Fulmer. Now, Phil Fulmer does not need you to preface his name every time with Hall of Fame. I mean, the Hall of Fame band AC/DC, the Hall of Fame second baseman Rabbit Moranville, for crying out loud. I mean, it just to me says that you become less of a journalist and more of a rooter when you're always referring to someone like Fulmer, not as who he is, just his name, but this, title that goes with it. Hall of Fame. It says, I'm a Tennessee shill, when you continually have to refer to Fulmer as the Hall of Fame coach Phil Fulmer. And then you start to wonder if the reports that Brice makes aren't motivated by a desire to protect Fulmer's reputation because he is a Fulmer fan. Nothing more, nothing less. Not because he's motivated by the truth. That's just the perception that I get. If you also heard 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities, the Chuck Oliver Show, I was shocked to learn that Oliver actually referred to Fulmer as a liar and saying that he was one of the best liars that he had ever met, talking about how Fulmer could actually lean in and say something to you, get you to believe it in that moment, and then after he left the room, you say, wait a minute, I was there when that happened. That's not the way it went down. No proof, just an idea here on what's going on. Anyway, I do ask this question right now. I know a lot of Vols fans are very happy. Phil Fulmer is back. He is a legend at the University of Tennessee. Pretty much rightly so. In fact, right now, one wonders, can you make the argument for Fulmer to be the greatest living Vol? I would have given that to John Majors before, because he did basically everything Peyton Manning did as a player, including going perhaps even one beyond. And we're talking about as a college football player, obviously as a pro football player. Manning's career is a little bit better than what Majors did with the Montreal Alouettes. But in the case of Majors and Manning as Tennessee Volunteers players, if you look at the records, Majors led a team from a 4-6 record to an undefeated regular season and a Cotton Bowl appearance in 1956, and Manning was never undefeated at Tennessee. So take that for what it is, and then you add on to Majors' coaching legacy, and I've always felt Majors was the greatest living Tennessee Volunteer. Well, now athletic director, national champion coach, good lineman. I wouldn't put his playing career alongside that of Manning or Majors. I don't know if I'd put anybody's playing career in a Tennessee uniform beside Manning or Majors. But with the third element now to Fulmer's career, does he become the greatest living Tennessee Volunteer? Just something to think about. But I asked this question. Is the football program at Tennessee really in better shape right now? Honestly, is it in better shape? Because on Friday, theoretically, Tennessee could have right now Mike Leach as a coach and John Currie as an athletic director, the man that brought back Lady Vols. Is it better to have unknown coach and Fulmer as the AD? And keep in mind, the idea of the coach as AD is pretty much an antiquated process. Outside of Fulmer, there are three coaches, or three people who are athletic directors at universities that you would know them from being something other than an athletic director. They are Lynn Swann at Southern California, Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin, and Bobby Valentine at High Point. Yeah, the former Mets manager and Rangers manager, that guy. He's an athletic director now. That's it. Other than that, basically athletic directors all come from administrative backgrounds. Their role is to raise money, hire coaches, this sort of thing. The days of the Frank Broyles, Vince Dooley athletic director, not what they were. And for that matter, what did Georgia football do after Dooley became the AD at Georgia? Something else also to think about. So the question is, would you rather right now, as we speak, have Leach and Currie or Fulmer and unknown? Okay, now who is going to be the next coach of the Tennessee Volunteers? We look at the Fulmer track record. He has hired one coach before. Back in the early part of this decade, or I think about 2013, if memory serves, he was asked to be a consultant when East Tennessee State revived football. And he basically was the major player in hiring Carl Torbush, the former North Carolina head football coach, now a Liberty defensive assistant, as the East Tennessee State head football coach. 3 years later, ETSU is 11-22 in those 3 years. If you were hiring Fulmer to be the athletic director so that you could hire a coach, he's literally the last person that you would ask to do that based on his track record. One can probably surmise, with the possible exception of T. Martin, because he obviously has a background with the Southern California offensive coordinator, that a Fulmer coaching hire will be a veteran coach, because that's who he hired in Carl Torbush. For that matter, who does Fulmer know that is an up-and-coming assistant? He's been out of the game for 10 years. Now, I also wanted to go back to Brice on my show, because I remember when I brought this up, because one of the reasons why we brought this up is when he was on my show, 2 hours before the announcement that Fulmer would be the athletic director at Tennessee, there was some talk at the time that it could be another figure. Jimmy Himes, who did not have his best week as a reporter, had reported a lieutenant in the Tennessee athletic department would become the athletic director originally, not Fulmer. Well, that turned out not to be true. But anyway, I mentioned that, well, is this who you want to hire as the AD, Fulmer, because his one coaching hire is 11-22. And Brice gave me an excuse that, well, Kennesaw State, I mentioned the Kennesaw State. If you're not familiar, East Tennessee State and Kennesaw State both started up their football programs at the same times. In fact, at the point where they first started playing, the very first game back for both Kennesaw State and East Tennessee State, FCS schools, by the way. Kennesaw State in the Big South Conference, ETSU in Johnson City, Tennessee. is in the Southern Conference, if you're not familiar. Anyway, the point being here that Tennessee, or the East Tennessee State, and KSU played each other in Johnson City in that very first game 2 years ago, 2015, 3 seasons ago. And the final score was KSU 56, ETSU 16. Kennesaw State this year was 10-1. They're in the second round of the FCS playoffs. In the first round, they defeated Samford. Samford defeated ETSU this year by 32 points. ETSU, meanwhile, is 4-7 this past year. Their high point was their second year back. They were 5-6. I just asked, is this the person that you would ask to hire a football coach when this is the track record? But the other thing, and I'm repeating myself there, was that Brice had pointed out, and he said, well, look at the talent. Look at the talent in the Atlanta area that Kennesaw State has to draw from as compared to the talent in the Tri-Cities and perhaps North Carolina that ETSU does. Okay, point taken. But then let me ask you this, and I say this all the time on my show. I point out, look, there are 201 football players in the NFL right now from Florida, and there are 33 from Tennessee. How are you going to compete? Wouldn't, therefore, if Kennesaw State, and it's natural and it's just expected to believe that they would have more success because of their location, wouldn't the same hold true, therefore, for Georgia against Tennessee? Shouldn't Vols fans just resign themselves to forever finishing behind the Bulldogs? Well, I doubt you'll get Brice or anyone else to take that argument up, but the point is that not only are expectations completely different for one team, ETSU, than the other, Tennessee, but they're not even covered in the same way. The arguments made for Volunteers' victory is simply, they don't wash when you use a counter-argument against ETSU victory. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. All right. In other words, the point here is if you can excuse, because of location, a current 10-1, 11-1 after the playoff victory Kennesaw State season, and not excuse a Tennessee 4-8 season, how can you excuse a 4-win ETSU season and, for that matter, find objection in an 11-1 Georgia season? Well, we here at Tennessee can't allow that to happen. That doesn't make any sense. In other words, it's the same argument, but you're turning it around for the various teams. By the way, Georgia this past year, state of Georgia had 29 players drafted by the NFL, most in the country. Most prolific state in the country for NFL talent in last year's draft. Josh Dobbs among the players from Georgia that were drafted into the NFL. Anyway, just some thoughts here about what's going on. I know a lot of Tennessee fans are just ecstatic that a Tennessee legend is back within the fold. But consider the situation. You've hired an athletic director who, frankly, this isn't the way that athletic directors are hired now. Lots of excuses are being made right now. The team isn't good. It's not a real good program at the current time, and it hasn't been in 10 years. Question is, will it ever be good again? Tennessee fans seem to think that it's still 1998, and it's not. Pat Forty has rated Tennessee as the 7th best job in the SEC. It may not be that high, especially after the debacle that's gone on this past week. And frankly, I think I might put it the 8th highest at best. I know that there was a ranking that came out earlier this year that said Tennessee was the sixth best after in the SEC, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, as well as LSU and Georgia. I might include in that mix ahead of Tennessee, Texas A&M, who, let's face it, they just were able to lure Jimbo Fisher away from Florida State. And for that matter, South Carolina, because there are more football players that come from the state of South Carolina than do Tennessee. Pageantry? I mean, what does Tennessee have that South Carolina doesn't? 1939 doesn't matter when you're recruiting players. You're talking about 20,000 nosebleed seats. I don't think anybody goes to one school or another because of nosebleed seats. And, a good example of this is that when the Tennessee Volunteers won the national championship in 1998, their entire defensive line was from the state of South Carolina. Also in 1998, Clemson was 3-8, and the University of South Carolina was 1-10. That's not going to happen again. In today's day and age, Darwin Walker and company, they become Gamecocks or Tigers. They don't become Vols. And this is something that Tennessee fans have got to understand. Pageantry, you've got it left and right. You've got, there's no, but if pageantry was all that important, Miami, as we speak, would not have a chance for the national championship. There's no pageantry in Miami. Just something to think about here. So, the situation at Tennessee, what can salvage it? If you're asking me, I think that the Vols, and I've said this on my show for the entire week, hire T. Martin. The only idea as to why I can see that the Vols would not hire T. Martin, I mean, I've heard these ideas that he doesn't get along with Peyton Manning. Well, so what if that's true? So what? Number two, I would say this about T. Martin. He's the only one that can come into Knoxville right now and really win the PR war. That all the Vols fans will say, yeah, fine. He'd also be given time to rebuild, which frankly another coach would not be given. When John Majors went to rebuild the Vols back in 1977, his first team went 4-7. Took him 3 years to get a winning record. Took him, I think it was 5 years for a bowl victory, 6 years to beat Alabama. What would it have been? 8 years to have a Sugar Bowl championship. So it took time. It will likely take similar time to rebuild, if it is possible, Tennessee at this time. Martin will be given that chance. Butch Jones was not. Maybe rightfully so. In my opinion, rightfully so. But nevertheless, I mean, he goes 9-4 2 years, 1-4-8, he's out. T. Martin will never have that kind of pressure on him. So that's the case. Until then, I'm Marky Billson. I'm on weekdays noon to 2 on AM 1420 in the Tri-Cities, Tennessee market. I also invite your phone calls at 423-743-6124, or you can comment below. And I would also point to the fact we're going to have many, many Vols writers on this week, continuing to cover the coaching search. One quick note, the show will not be on Monday. There is actually a charity event that is going to be on. It's the Kiwanis K-Day, which on WEMB, standing, of course, for Wisely Employing Marky Billson, has been a standard dating back for, I think, back into the 60s, an annual day where they honor all the people that give money to the Kiwanis Club here in East Tennessee. So on Monday, I won't have a show. Listen in, find out who your friends and neighbors are that honor the Kiwanis Club, that give, shoes to the needy and things of this nature. And then on Tuesday, we can begin the discussion of the Vols again. And also, we can discuss how the Grey Cup, yes, the Canadian Football League, will have a better halftime show with Shania Twain than the NFL will in the Super Bowl with Justin Timberlake. Until then, I'll see you noon on Tuesday.